Hey guys, don't mind my puppy in the background. I just have some talking points, and I'm really going to talk about my essay and how, first off, how my research question changed, how I formulated my thesis, and lastly, how I set up my paragraphs, my body paragraphs. So when I first read Passing, obviously the major thing that comes out to you is racial issues. I mean, that's one of the biggest things in the novel. So I thought, okay, let me tackle that more heavily and do it more in depth. So that was how I originally was going to do my paper. But as I began to read more academic essays, I really saw this theme of like middle class values, and it really struck a chord with me. So I thought, you know what? That sounds like a more interesting topic. It's more, unique, and it's not so maybe blatant to the reader. So I really wanted to go into that in depth. So the first thing was how my original thing of race switched into class. So that's why I absolutely love reading other people's interpretations of novels, because then your reading also gets drastically changed. So once I realized I was going to talk about class, I needed a thesis. And obviously, I'm not going to read you my paper, but the general tone of my thesis was basically, even though that there are racial issues in the novel, Irene places class above everything else in her life. She wants that security, she wants that safety of the middle class American life. So coming up with a thesis is the most important part, because everything that is in the rest of your essay has to relate back to your thesis, absolutely, because that's the point you're trying to prove. So I found 4 absolutely great sources that talked about some different aspects of Irene's dedication to class. However, the hardest part for me was making it a coherent essay and also a smoothly flowing essay, because like I said, all the sources were great, but did they all come together in a way that I could make a nice progression? And I found a way to do that. And honestly, I just want to say that my favorite paper that I read was by far the hardest to include in my personal essay, because it talked about the relationship between mistress and servant, or respectively Irene and Zulena. Because all my 3 other papers were talking about class in a very open way, like spanning the whole novel, whereas that particular paper focused on one relationship and just honed in on one specific instance. However, I did include it. So how I set up my paragraphs. So obviously my first paragraph was my introductory paragraph. So my second one, I wanted to go from race to class. So I wanted to show the transition so that my reader isn't just thrown into, okay, let's talk about class. I wanted to definitely want the reader to understand that I understand that race is a very important issue in this novel. So we can't disregard race at all. But I wanted to show this subtle transition from race to class. And then my second paragraph, I talk about class values and how Irene saw class values. So that way, when I kept on using this idea of like class values and class ideals, the reader would understand where I was coming from. So I definitely wanted them to have a base of what class meant to Irene. And then thirdly is the example I said. So I wanted a very concrete example of how Irene places her class ideals over racial ideals. And that kind of goes back to this idea, and basically what I was trying to say is that when Irene keeps Claire's secret, it's not for some unsaid bond between their race, it's because Irene wants to self-preserve what she has, and she wants to keep her middle-class values. And then lastly, I end with like the ending of the novel, and I really, even though it's an ambiguous ending, I know, and we don't know for sure how Claire fell to her ultimate demise, I think the one with the best motive and the one who would be willing to do it would be Irene, because she wanted security so bad, and Claire was messing up everything that she had basically upheld to this point. So I found an author who also kind of felt that same way, and that's how I ended my paper with. So I absolutely love research papers because it's the opportunity for us to read other people's analysis and then kind of formulate our own. And in this case, for me, it really kind of changed the way I looked at Passing. Like, I wasn't looking at it in like just black and white race. I was looking at it, okay, race is an important aspect, but what about middle class values? What about like the American dream? Or what about all these different things I didn't take into account the first time I read it? But that's what I learned. I really enjoyed writing this paper. I really enjoyed reading the book, and that's it. Bye.